Visuals of a dimly lit wrestling ring. The crowd roars, but the focus is on a solitary figure, Barbara Bush, draped in shadow, her face resolute yet somber. A low hum of suspenseful music underscores the scene. In the heart of America's most unexpected arenas lies a tale shrouded in grit, controversy, and undeniable allure. This is not just the story of a wrestling ring. It is the story of a legacy, a woman, and the battles fought both inside and outside the ropes. This is the story of Barbara Bush, the force behind the enigma that changed wrestling forever. Old footage plays, a young Barbara Bush, smiling among her family, contrasting sharply with the roaring chaos of the wrestling world. The visuals shift to newspaper headlines. Wrestling's queen emerges and scandal in the ring, known to millions as BB. Barbara Bush carved her name into history, not as a mere participant, but as an architect of wrestling's most controversial era. To understand her story is to peel back the layers of spectacle, drama, and personal sacrifice, a journey unlike any other. Images flash of an empty arena, symbolic of the calm before the storm, intercut with close-ups of Barbara's memorabilia, a championship belt, faded photographs, and handwritten notes. From the moment she stepped into the world of wrestling, Barbara's life became a battleground of ambition, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of breaking barriers. But how did a woman from a distinguished political dynasty find herself at the epicenter of wrestling's raw and untamed world? And at what cost? Scene fades to an older Barbara, sitting in an armchair, her eyes reflective yet piercing. Her voice cuts through the silence. People ask me if I regret it, if the bruises, the scandals, and the fights were worth it. My answer is simple. The ring doesn't lie. It's where I found myself, and it's where I lost myself. The narration becomes more dramatic, accompanied by rapid cuts of key moments in Barbara's wrestling career, an iconic match, a heated press conference, and an emotional embrace with a young fan. This is not just a documentary. It is an unfiltered look at the rise and fall of a woman who defied expectations, rewrote rules, and paid the ultimate price for a life lived in the spotlight. To truly know Barbara Bush is to step into the ring and feel the weight of her choices. The screen goes dark, with only Barbara's voice echoing. Wrestling isn't about winning or losing. It's about surviving. And survival? That's where the real story begins. The scene opens with a sepia-tone view of a quaint suburban neighborhood. Children are playing in the street, and a young Barbara Bush, no more than 6 years old, is seen sitting on the porch of her family home, clutching a book. Before the bright lights of the wrestling ring and the roar of thousands, Barbara Bush was just another child growing up in a world that seemed far removed from the chaos she would later embrace. Born into privilege and surrounded by expectation, Barbara's early years were a mix of tradition and quiet rebellion. Footage shifts to family photographs, a baby Barbara in her mother's arms, a young girl posing proudly in a school uniform, and a teenage Barbara at a local community event. Raised in a household of public servants and intellectuals, Barbara was taught the values of duty, decorum, and discipline, but even at a young age, she exhibited a fiery independence that often set her apart from her siblings. An older cousin's voice plays over a family reunion video. She wasn't like the rest of us. We were content to follow the rules. But Barbara, she was always questioning, always challenging the status quo. If there was a mold, Barbara was determined to break it. The screen transitions to a young Barbara, standing up to a group of boys at a local park, her stance firm and defiant. One of her earliest battles was for recognition, whether it was on the playground or at the dinner table. Barbara fought to make her voice heard, This tenacity would later become her defining trait. Interview footage of Barbara plays. Her voice calm but resolute. I never wanted to just be someone's daughter or someone's sister. I wanted to be someone in my own right, and if that meant stepping out of line, so be it. The scene shifts to her school years, a montage of Barbara excelling in debate competitions, leading a school protest for better extracurricular funding, and earning the begrudging respect of her teachers. Her formative years were marked by bold choices and even bolder dreams. Though her family envisioned a future in politics or academia, Barbara's interests leaned toward the unconventional. Barbara, age 15, is seen sneaking into a wrestling match with her best friend. The camera lingers on her wide-eyed expression as she watches a wrestler land a dramatic finishing move. That night changed everything. For the first time, Barbara saw a world where strength, drama, and individuality weren't just accepted, they were celebrated. Wrestling wasn't just entertainment to her. It was art, rebellion, and power rolled into one. Barbara's childhood diary is shown, with a scrawled entry that reads, "One day, I'll be in that ring. I don't care what it takes." Barbara's family dismissed her fascination as a phase. But for her, it was the beginning of a dream that would defy societal norms and family expectations. Scene fades to Barbara at 18, staring at a poster advertising a local wrestling show. Her face is a mix of excitement and determination. Barbara Bush wasn't just preparing for a career, she was preparing for a revolution. And the world of wrestling would never be the same. The section ends with Barbara's voice, filled with nostalgia. "My childhood wasn't perfect, but it gave me the fire I needed to chase the impossible. And wrestling was my impossible." The screen opens with a bustling city street in the 1970s. Barbara, now in her early 20s, walks with purpose, clutching a portfolio under her arm. Her expression is a mixture of determination and nervous energy. When Barbara Bush decided to step into the world of professional wrestling, she was met with skepticism, ridicule, and more than a few raised eyebrows. Wrestling, especially in those days, was not a place for women, let alone one from a prestigious family. But for Barbara, the challenge only fueled her resolve. Footage shifts to Barbara entering a dimly lit gym filled with aspiring wrestlers. The air is thick with sweat and ambition. A gruff trainer eyes her warily as she steps onto the mat. She was out of place, no doubt about it, but Barbara didn't care. She wanted to learn, and she was willing to start at the bottom. An interview clip of an older wrestler plays. "I remember the first time she walked in. She didn't look like much, too polished, too clean. But then she hit that mat, and I thought, this girl's got grit." Montage of Barbara's early training, struggling to lift weights, getting thrown in practice matches, and nursing bruises after long, grueling days. Barbara's early days in wrestling were anything but glamorous. She faced relentless physical and emotional challenges, often questioning whether she was cut out for the brutal demands of the sport. Barbara's voice narrates over scenes of her solitary training late at night. "There were days I wanted to quit, days when I thought, what am I doing here? But then I'd remind myself, nothing worth having comes easy." The screen shifts to Barbara's first small-time wrestling gig in a rundown venue. The crowd is sparse and rowdy, but Barbara stands in the corner of the ring, focused and ready. Her first match wasn't a victory. It wasn't even close. But for Barbara, it was a step toward proving she belonged in a world that didn't want her. The match plays out in a chaotic blur, ending with Barbara being pinned. The camera lingers on her face as she gets up, bruised but smiling. That night, Barbara learned an important lesson. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about always getting back up Footage transitions to Barbara taking odd jobs to support her dream, waiting tables, cleaning gyms, and even sewing costumes for other wrestlers. She was relentless. Every dollar she earned went toward training, travel, or gear. And while the road was lonely, Barbara knew she was building something bigger than herself. Barbara's voice, filled with conviction, plays over images of her writing notes in a tattered notebook. I wasn't just wrestling for me. I was wrestling for every girl who'd ever been told she couldn't. I wanted to prove we had a place in the ring. The scene shifts to Barbara's first breakthrough, a small-time promoter noticing her determination and offering her a recurring spot in local matches. Barbara's persistence began to pay off. She was no longer just a hopeful outsider. She was becoming a recognized name in underground wrestling circles. Clips of Barbara's early matches show her developing a unique style, combining technical skill with theatrical flair. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but Barbara knew how to tell a story in the ring. She made the audience feel something, and that's what set her apart. The section ends with Barbara standing in the middle of a dimly lit ring after a hard-fought match. Her hands are on her hips, and her eyes are fixed on the crowd, which is beginning to cheer. That night, I realized something. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was my reality, and I was just getting started. The scene opens with a packed wrestling arena. The sound of roaring fans filling the air. Bright lights sweep across the ring as Barbara, now known by her stage name BB, makes her entrance. She wears a custom cape emblazoned with her initials, her expression fierce and determined. By the late 1970s, Barbara Bush was no longer a name whispered in small-time wrestling circles. She was BB, a rising star who had begun capturing the hearts and attention of audiences across the country. Clips of her matches flash across the screen. BB locking opponents in submission holds, performing high-risk moves, and engaging the crowd with her charismatic taunts. Her unique blend of technical skill, theatrical showmanship, and unapologetic confidence made her a fan favorite. But it wasn't just her moves in the ring that set her apart. It was the way she told a story, the way she made every match feel personal. An interview with a former wrestling promoter plays. BB was a natural storyteller. She didn't just fight. She created drama. Every feud, every alliance, every match. It was like watching a live-action movie. Fans ate it up. Montage of Barbara cutting intense promos backstage, her voice commanding and her words cutting. She wasn't just competing against her opponents. She was competing against the very idea that women couldn't headline a show. And she was winning. The camera pans to a sold-out arena as BB faces off against one of the top male wrestlers of the time. The tension is palpable as the two lock eyes before the bell rings. This match was a turning point. It wasn't just another fight. It was a statement. Barbara wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting to prove that women could go toe-to-toe with the best in the business. The match unfolds with high-intensity action, ending in a dramatic victory for BB. The crowd erupts as she stands in the center of the ring, raising her arms in triumph. That night, BB became more than a wrestler. She became a symbol of change. The screen transitions to Barbara appearing on talk shows, magazine covers, and promotional posters. Her name is everywhere, and her influence is growing. BB wasn't just dominating in the ring. She was breaking into mainstream culture. She was featured on late-night talk shows, interviewed by major publications, and even became the face of a popular energy drink campaign. Barbara's voice plays over footage of her signing autographs for young fans. Every time a little girl told me she wanted to be like me, it reminded me why I started this journey. It wasn't just about wrestling. It was about opening doors for others. Clips of her interactions with fans show her taking pictures, giving heartfelt advice, and connecting with people on a personal level. It wasn't just a star. She was a role model. But with fame came new challenges and new enemies. The scene shifts to news reports and headlines highlighting controversies, rumors of backstage feuds, accusations of favoritism, and intense scrutiny of her personal life. Barbara's rise to fame wasn't without its struggles. The higher she climbed, the more people tried to tear her down. But Barbara wasn't one to back away from a fight. Barbara is seen confronting a rival wrestler during a heated press conference. Her words are sharp, her demeanor unshakable. If people think they can intimidate me, they're in for a rude awakening. I didn't come this far to be silenced. The screen cuts to an iconic moment. Barbara standing on the turnbuckle, raising a championship belt above her head as the crowd chants her name. In the span of a few short years, BB had gone from an underdog to one of the most recognizable figures in wrestling. But with success came an even greater burden, the pressure to stay on top. The section ends with Barbara sitting backstage after a match. The cheers of the crowd still audible in the distance. She's exhausted but smiling. I used to dream about moments like this, but now that I'm here, I realize the fight isn't over. It's just beginning. The scene opens with Barbara sitting in a dimly lit dressing room, staring at herself in the mirror. Her face is bruised, and her expression is a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The faint sounds of a cheering crowd echo in the background. For all her triumphs in the ring, Barbara Bush's journey was far from easy. Behind the glitz and the glory were battles that no one saw, battles that tested her strength, her resilience, and her humanity. Clips of backstage chaos flash across the screen. Arguments with promoters, tense conversations with fellow wrestlers, and Barbara icing her injuries after grueling matches. Wrestling is a world of high stakes and even higher pressures. For Barbara, the constant need to prove herself to fans, to peers, to herself, was both a blessing and a curse. Barbara's voice plays over scenes of her training alone in a gym late at night. There were days when I felt like I was running on empty. My body hurt. My mind was exhausted. And yet, I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop. The screen shifts to headlines highlighting controversies, a feud with a top promoter, allegations of favoritism, and rumors of personal struggles. Barbara's meteoric rise came with its fair share of detractors. The wrestling world is notoriously cutthroat, and Barbara found herself at the center of countless controversies. An interview clip with a rival wrestler plays. BB was good, damn good, but she wasn't afraid to step on toes to get what she wanted. That rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Clips of Barbara arguing with promoters and walking away from tense negotiations are intercut with scenes of her in the ring. Her performances as fierce as ever. She was labeled difficult, stubborn, even ungrateful. But for Barbara, standing her ground wasn't about ego, it was about survival. The screen transitions to Barbara's personal life, a fleeting glimpse of her attending family gatherings, followed by scenes of her sitting alone in her apartment, staring at old photos. As her career soared, Barbara's personal life began to unravel. The demands of fame left little room for family, friends, or even self-reflection. Barbara's voice, tinged with sadness, narrates over these moments. I miss birthdays, weddings, and so many little moments that I can never get back. I told myself it was worth it, but some days, I wasn't so sure. The scene shifts to Barbara battling injuries, a torn ligament, a fractured rib, and countless bruises. Medical professionals advise her to rest. But Barbara is back in the ring almost immediately. She pushed her body to the limit, ignoring the warning signs in her relentless pursuit of greatness. But the human body can only take so much. An emotional clip shows Barbara collapsing backstage after a particularly brutal match. Medics rush to her side as she struggles to catch her breath. That night was a wake-up call, or at least it should have been. But Barbara wasn't ready to slow down. Not yet. The screen fades to Barbara sitting in an interview chair. Her expression contemplative. People see the glory, but they don't see the cost. The sleepless nights, the pain, the loneliness. Wrestling gave me everything, but it also took so much away. The section ends with a montage. Barbara sitting alone in her hotel room, staring out the window, her body covered in bandages as she prepares for another match. And her face, a mixture of pain and determination. As she steps back into the ring, I wasn't just fighting my opponents, I was fighting myself. And some days, I didn't know who was winning. The scene opens with a massive arena packed with fans chanting BB, BB, BB. The camera pans to Barbara, standing triumphantly in the center of the ring. Championship belt held high above her head. Her face a mixture of pride and determination. For Barbara Bush, the late 1980s and early 1990s marked the height of her career. She wasn't just a wrestler, she was a phenomenon. A trailblazer who had shattered glass ceilings and redefined what it meant to be a woman in professional wrestling. Clips of Barbara's most iconic matches play: a high-stakes cage match, a tag team victory, and a dramatic championship win where the crowd erupts into deafening applause. Her matches were legendary, her moves precise and devastating, and her ability to connect with the audience unmatched. But it wasn't just about the spectacle. It was about the message. Barbara's voice plays over footage of her interacting with young fans. I wanted every little girl in that audience to know they could be strong, fearless, and unstoppable. Wrestling was my platform to show them what was possible. The screen shifts to interviews with wrestling commentators and former opponents. BB wasn't just a wrestler, she was a storyteller. She could turn a match into a masterpiece, making you feel every moment, every emotion. That's what made her great. She had this energy that you couldn't ignore. Whether you loved her or hated her, you couldn't take your eyes off her. Montage of Barbara breaking records. The first woman to headline a major wrestling event. The longest-running women's champion. And the first to transition seamlessly into a cross-gender match format. These milestones weren't just victories. They were statements. Barbara Bush wasn't just competing. She was changing the game. The camera cuts to Barbara accepting an award at a prestigious wrestling ceremony. She stands on stage, visibly emotional as the audience gives her a standing ovation. I never set out to make history. I just wanted to be the best at what I loved. But if my journey inspires others, then every bruise, every setback, every sacrifice was worth it. The screen transitions to the impact of Barbara's career outside the ring. Her work as a mentor to young wrestlers, her role in promoting gender equality in sports, and her appearances on talk shows and in public campaigns. Barbara used her fame to uplift others, championing causes close to her heart and mentoring the next generation of wrestlers. For her, it wasn't enough to succeed. She wanted to leave the industry better than she found it. An emotional clip shows a young female wrestler thanking Barbara during a backstage interview. She believed in me when no one else did. She showed me that I could make it, that I could be more than just a side act. I owe everything to her. The screen shifts to Barbara standing in front of a packed crowd, giving a heartfelt speech after winning a Lifetime Achievement Award. Wrestling isn't just a sport. It's a family, a community, and I'm honored to have been part of something so much bigger than myself. The camera pans across the audience, showing tears, applause, and admiration as Barbara raises the award above her head. Barbara Bush's legacy wasn't just in her victories or her titles. It was in the door she opened and the lives she touched. She proved that women could not only compete but excel in a male-dominated industry, inspiring countless others to follow in her footsteps. The section ends with Barbara walking down the ramp after a match, the crowd chanting her name as she looks back one last time, a small smile on her face. Barbara's peak wasn't just about personal triumph. It was about leaving an indelible mark on the world of wrestling. And her story was far from over. The scene opens with an empty wrestling ring under a single spotlight. The camera slowly pans across the arena, its silence contrasting sharply with the roaring crowds that once filled it. The sound of Barbara's voice breaks the stillness. Nothing lasts forever. Not the cheers. Not the glory. Wrestling gave me everything. But it also took its toll. And eventually, you realize even legends have limits. Clips of Barbara's later matches play. Her movements are slower. Her injuries more evident. The crowd's cheers remain strong. But the strain on her face tells a different story. By the mid-1990s, the physical demands of wrestling began catching up with Barbara. Years of punishing matches, relentless schedules, and mounting injuries took their toll. Her body was a testament to her career, bruised, battered, and unyielding. An interview with Barbara plays, her tone reflective. I ignored the pain for so long. I told myself it was part of the job, but deep down, I knew I couldn't keep going like that forever. The screen shifts to footage of Barbara backstage, wrapping her knees and wincing as she prepares for yet another match. She pushed through injury after injury, refusing to let her fans down. But the cost of her resilience was steep. News headlines flash across the screen. BB out with major injury. Wrestling icon faces career-ending surgery. And Barbara Bush, is this the end? After a devastating shoulder injury during a high-profile match, Barbara was forced to step away from the ring. For someone who had built her life around wrestling, the idea of stopping was almost unbearable. Barbara's voice plays over footage of her recovering in a hospital bed. Wrestling wasn't just my career, it was my identity. Without it, I didn't know who I was anymore. The screen transitions to Barbara's brief return to wrestling after her recovery. The crowd greets her with thunderous applause. But her performance lacks the same energy and intensity that once defined her. Her return was bittersweet. The fans loved her. But Barbara knew her time in the ring was nearing its end. Clips of Barbara mentoring younger wrestlers backstage show her shifting focus. As she stepped back from the spotlight, Barbara began channeling her passion into teaching. She became a mentor, sharing her knowledge and experiences with the next generation of wrestlers. An emotional moment shows Barbara giving a pep talk to a young wrestler before their first big match. I told them what I wish someone had told me. It's not about perfection, it's about heart. If you give the audience your all, they'll never forget you. The screen fades to Barbara attending a fan convention, signing autographs and sharing stories with fans of all ages. Even as her time in the ring came to an end, Barbara's connection with her fans remained as strong as ever. They weren't just supporters, they were family. Barbara's voice, filled with gratitude, plays over scenes of her smiling with fans. They stood by me through everything, the highs, the lows, the mistakes. I owe them everything. The section ends with Barbara standing in the middle of an empty arena, looking around with a bittersweet smile. Wrestling was my life, but stepping away made me realize that life is more than what happens in the ring. It's about the people you meet, the lessons you learn, and the legacy you leave behind. The scene opens with Barbara standing in the center of the ring under a spotlight. The arena dark and silent except for the faint hum of the crowd waiting to erupt. She holds a microphone, her hands trembling slightly, and her voice carries both strength and emotion. I've given my life to this ring. Every match, every moment, Every memory, it's all been for you. But tonight, I stand here not as BB, the wrestler, but as Barbara Bush, ready to say goodbye. The camera pans to the audience, where fans of all ages hold up signs, "Thank you, BB, forever a legend." And the Queen of the Ring, some are wiping away tears. After decades of blood, sweat, and tears, Barbara Bush made the difficult decision to retire from professional wrestling. Her farewell wasn't just an event. It was a moment etched into the history of the sport. Clips from her farewell tour play. Barbara shaking hands with fellow wrestlers, embracing young fans, and delivering heartfelt speeches after matches. The energy is bittersweet, a mixture of celebration and loss. She didn't just bow out quietly. Barbara made sure her final moments in the spotlight were a testament to everything she stood for: resilience, passion, and connection. The screen transitions to Barbara's last match, a symbolic bout against a younger wrestler she had mentored. The two exchange powerful moves, their chemistry in the ring a reflection of respect and shared history. In her final match, Barbara chose to pass the torch. She didn't fight for victory, she fought for the future. And when the referee's hand hit the mat for the final count, the crowd erupted in thunderous applause. A standing ovation that seemed to last forever. The match ends with Barbara raising her opponent's hand in victory, the younger wrestler visibly emotional. The camera lingers on Barbara as she waves to the crowd, her eyes shining with unshed tears. As she stepped out of the ring for the last time, Barbara knew she was leaving on her terms. It wasn't just the end of a career. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The screen shifts to her post-retirement life. Barbara running training seminars, appearing as a commentator for major wrestling events, and attending charity events. Even after her retirement, Barbara stayed connected to the world she loved. She became a mentor, a coach, and an advocate for wrestlers' rights, using her platform to create lasting change. An interview with Barbara plays, her voice calm and reflective. "I've done everything I set out to do and more, but now it's about giving back, about making sure the next generation has a better path than I did." The screen cuts to Barbara receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at a prestigious wrestling ceremony. She stands on stage, her speech filled with gratitude and wisdom. "Thank you for letting me live my dream. Wrestling has been my greatest love and my greatest teacher. And while my time in the ring is over, my heart will always belong to the sport." The section ends with Barbara walking away from the stage, surrounded by her peers and family. The crowd chants her name as she looks back one last time, a smile of contentment on her face. In her farewell, Barbara Bush reminded the world why she was more than just a wrestler. She was a pioneer, a leader, and above all, a fighter who never stopped believing in the power of dreams. The scene opens with a montage of Barbara Bush's most iconic moments: her first championship win, her fiery promos, and the countless fans chanting her name. The images fade into a close-up of Barbara, older now, sitting in a quiet room filled with memorabilia, championship belts, photos, and fan letters. Barbara Bush's journey was more than just a wrestling career. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the courage to defy expectations, and the determination to leave the world better than she found it. Barbara's voice plays softly as the camera pans over her memorabilia. "I didn't set out to change the world. I just wanted to prove to myself and to everyone else that I could do it. But somewhere along the way, I realized that my fight wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who ever felt like they didn't belong." Clips of interviews with her peers and protégés follow. She broke barriers we didn't even realize existed. She showed us what was possible. Barbara wasn't just a wrestler. She was a mentor, a leader, and a friend. Her legacy isn't just in the ring. It's in every person she inspired. The screen shifts to footage of Barbara interacting with fans at conventions and charity events. Her smile warm and genuine as she listens to their stories. Her impact extended far beyond the ropes. Barbara Bush became a symbol of strength, determination, and hope for countless people around the world. An emotional clip shows a young woman holding a championship belt, tearfully crediting Barbara during a post-match interview. "If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be here today. She made me believe in myself." The scene transitions to Barbara walking through an empty wrestling arena. The lights dim, but the echoes of past cheers still present. Even in her later years, Barbara remained connected to the world she loved. She continued to mentor, inspire, and give back, ensuring that her legacy would endure for generations. Barbara's voice plays over a slow montage of her career highlights. Wrestling wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about connection, about telling stories that mattered. "And if I've done that, then I've done my job." The screen fades to black, and Barbara's words linger. Every bruise, every scar, every moment in that ring, it was all worth it. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the mark you leave behind. The final shot is of Barbara's championship belt resting on a pedestal, surrounded by dim light. As the camera slowly zooms out, the words "Thank you, BB" appear on the screen, and Barbara Bush's story is not just the story of a wrestler. It's the story of a fighter, a trailblazer, and a woman who proved that anything is possible. Her legacy lives on, not just in the history books, but in the hearts of everyone she touched. The scene fades to black as the sound of a cheering crowd echoes one last time.